Hey there, Squirrel Army. How's it going? For today, I think we've got to talk about how good Roaming Throne is.
You can join the Squirrel Army by subscribing.
Alrighty, guys. So, this is a card that I missed during the preview season and missed quite a bit as the lead up and post of Ixalan. But goddamn, we need to talk about how good this thing is. It's just one of those things that I can't believe I missed this thing. And I've seen it online quite a bit since the set has come out. The only reason I actually knew about this card at all was I opened one in a pack and read through it. And I was looking at one of my decks and I was like, Jesus Christ, this is a good card for this deck because it's a fairly tribal deck. But then I was thinking about it and going, well, it doesn't really matter if you're very tribal because, like, again, it just works with your commander as long as it has the right types of abilities. So I will read through it for those people who don't know what it is and don't know what it does. So it's a 4-mana, 4/4 artifact, has Ward 2. That's kind of nice, having Ward 2, having that little bit of protection, because it is 4 mana, and there are sort of some similar effects to this, but I'll get into what it does here. You choose a creature type. It is also the chosen types. It is a golem, so I don't know. It goes well into things that are already doing golems. I guess it also goes very well into things that are doing things with artifacts and things like that, but it does obviously, as I said before, work well in tribal strategies. But if a triggered ability from another creature you control triggers of the chosen type, it triggers an additional time. So you just have to have any triggered ability on your commander, not activated ability, on your commander, and you want this thing probably 9 times out of 10 because it does so much for what your commander already kind of wants to do. It's almost like Panharmonicon for abilities. And whatnot for your creatures. If obviously you are a much more tribal focused or semi-tribal focused deck, then of course it goes way, way, way up in value as well because you'll get more effects on the rest of your tribal effects as well. It only does work for creatures, so it's not any permanent type, but still, that's still really, really good. There still are a lot of effects in that space. I'm finding it tough to sort of say that this is just one of those like auto staple cards because it is like seemingly like one of those auto staple cards. But as we've seen, like not every deck plays even the most played card in the format, Sol Ring. So like, it's one of those things to say that it's a stable card, but it certainly is feeling like a very stapley sort of card that a lot of decks would want. Now that I'm, like, going back and having a bit of a look at it, I'm going, well, do I want this for just almost any deck that I have, you know, that actually has triggered abilities on my commander or even a fair few triggered abilities in my deck? Like, because it will increase those triggered effects. So, like, I have a lot of +1/+1 counters, triggers in my counters deck, and most of the counter stuff is with humans. So if I name humans, I'm going to get twice that effect. I don't know. It's one of those things. It's tough to say, like, because the density is sort of there because it's semi-tribal, but I don't know whether triggering those effects again is exactly worth it. It's tough to say. Like, the commander certainly makes it help a lot. So I think that, like, it having the text of if your commander does a thing, then you just really want it anyway. That seems like where I think I want to put it the most. I don't want to just put it in a deck that has a general tribal or even semi-tribal sort of payoffs in the deck without the commander already kind of doing that kind of thing itself. Because at least if you have this and if you have your commander, which is where you would be evaluating this card only in concert with your commander for the most part, because you're not guaranteed to have anything else unless you're tutoring a lot again, so that's a bit different. But still, I would think that if you have this and your commander's doing triggered effects, then you just probably want it. So, like, I'm looking at now, it's like, what? Like, $15? This thing's going to go way up, especially without a reprint, because any tribal deck is going to want this thing. Any deck that has a commander that is triggering effects is going to want this, because again, it is basically a doubling of an effect. Like, you can again pay for Rings of Brighthearth and do a very similar thing to what this is doing, but this does it for free. And like, it's a 4/4 for 4 that's not super impressive or anything, but it is of the same tribe of your commander. So I don't know, like, again, there could be stuff like that. And if you clone this thing, like, that's where I was like thinking. I was like, well, I have 2 decks that kind of want to clone things. So I had 2 of this thing. Well, I'm just going to quadruple my commander's abilities. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, you know, like, whenever it triggers, it's going to trigger like 3 times. That's going to be insane. So even if, like, I have to pay mana for that ability, like, saying that I have a, you know, sort of ability Panharmonicon or triggered Panharmonicon effect, that is super, super, super powerful. And it just cannot be overstated how strong that is. Obviously, like, you can just jam it in any deck because it's colorless, but, like, you don't want to just jam it in any deck. Like I said before, I wouldn't want to jam it in a deck that just has a bunch of effects that actually, you know, have those effects, like, on a type that is fairly common throughout your deck, because it's not going to, in my mind, happen enough. That's where I'm at. So I'm just thinking that you really want it to be on your commander, and if you get the other effects, like from some of your other creatures happening to be the same type or whatever else. Actually, holy crap, I just realized that this should go in Chatterfang. Like, oh my god, because that would be bonkers. It's like basically another Parallel Lives effect, which that deck really, really wants. Like, it really wants to generate a lot of tokens. Yes, there's not that many other squirrels, but that doesn't really matter. Like, you know, like, just being a Parallel Lives on a stick with Ward 2 is probably darn well good enough. And in my Selesnya token deck, well, my commander, again, makes tokens. So that it 100% wants that. Plus, it's a semi-human tribal deck. So there's a lot of other humans that are kind of doing stuff in that deck. So it would work really well in that deck. So I'm assessing it for all my decks effectively and thinking, well, yes, I could put it in my Simic deck, probably. I don't know. I don't think I could put it in my 4-color deck very easily, because, like, the commanders in that deck don't really, like, have triggered effects or whatever and that sort of thing. So I don't think that works. There's not really enough of one tribe or another. There are some triggered effects, but not enough to make it feel like that's worth it. Rakdos, that probably would work, because the commander, you know, doubling the commander's effect. It's sort of like, you know, again, a Death Harmonicon sort of style of an effect that I've already kind of got that effect. So, and it is becoming like, well, what am I going to cut or whatever, and that sort of thing sometimes. But still, like, this is just so good that you've got to try to think and go, okay, well, what can I cut for this thing? Because this thing is dumb and friggin', you know, belongs in a lot of decks that I would probably be running. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with it at the moment, guys, because it's just super duper strong. And even if it's not 100% on theme, like, I have this legendary tribal deck that I'm building right now, and I'm going, well, it could go in that, because that deck really has a lot of triggered effects with its commander, but, like, the problem there is it really wants legends. And then I'm almost going like, well, it doesn't have to 100% be legends. like, just like, because I've got, like, Anointed Procession and some of those other effects because it's making tokens and things like that. So, like, just looking at it like it's, again, another Anointed Procession, except it's a 4/4 with Ward 2, whatever. Or it's, another Mondrak, like, that's pretty darn good, but it's actually helping my commander do the thing, even though there's a mana gate on that. But still, like, that this is a very powerful effect, and I probably want it. So, like, again, just assessing and sitting back and going, yes, maybe I want 6 of these or whatever. It's like, damn, this is good because it just works for so many things that actually do stuff, and that I'm already kind of building or have already built. So I'm just like going, well, where could I find a space for this, and how can I, get the effects that I want, because that seems like right down the alley of a lot of the decks that I've got. So yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say. So yeah, that's where I'm at with my decks. And I think that everyone needs to be like doing that and going, like, again, what are my decks? What does my commander do? What triggered abilities am I triggering? Again, that's a really good like starting point to be like thinking about like adding this to decks, because, and then it's like, again, as I sort of said, what am I going to cut for this thing? And that becomes the difficult question. And as we've said many times here, you've got to cut good cards to add other good cards, because there is no such thing as quote unquote bad cards in decks anyway to start with, really, because a deck is inclusive of itself in many ways. But just the level of decks that you see nowadays in the sort of EDH space is just so much more powerful than it was like 2 or 3, years ago, or even a year ago or whatever, because they keep printing bomb things like this, which is really dumb and really works well for a lot of things. Yes, it doesn't do literally everything, but for the things that, it does, you're going to be happy to have it when you do have it. Like, obviously you cannot draw it or whatever, again, if you're not really tutoring for it. But if you're tutoring for it, obviously then it's amazing as well, because you're going to get it, and you're going to know that you're going to get, significant value. Because, again, if your commander's effect is worth doing once, it's probably worth doing twice, and paying 4 mana for that isn't a very big, reach, I don't think, because it, like, especially if you're like can double spell on a turn or whatever and that sort of thing, now your commander is doing 4 times as much as what it was doing without this thing. Like, even if you don't have the mana to kind of do it, you still have the opportunity at which to take advantage of those effects. So it's, yeah, like, again, for any deck that has a lot of the same tribe and has a lot of triggered effects within the same deck, then you're even going to get more value. You might not know what kind of value you might be getting, but again, you're going to get way more value out of this thing just sitting there on the field. And yes, people are going to try to remove it. Obviously, that's a given for a card that's super powerful, but still, like, just the value that you could kind of get out of this kind of thing. Like, I know that there's got to be some combos with this. I'm thinking of just playing this thing fairly, and even then this thing is busted to all hell, like, if my commander takes extra combat somehow, what's that? I'll get another extra combat, whatever. Like, oh dear, like, actually, doesn't that make it, like, go infinite, like, or whatever? With, like, cards like Aurelia or stuff like that? No, I guess it doesn't, because you only get it once. So you get 2 combats. I guess it works better with things that already do it. Like, I guess, like, if you've got some things that take extra combats, or you can make tokens that do it, and things like that, then yeah, I guess so. Like, there's some very weird things there that I'm just sort of processing through the old brain here and just, like, realizing how you could actually do that. But even then, like, that's not probably the most powerful things that you could be doing with this. Like, again, like, that's still probably one of the more high-end, like things that you could do with this that is still semi-fair. Like you can just be like, okay, cool, I'm just gonna play this thing and combo off and literally win the game or whatever. Like, so you could end the game with cards like this very easily, and you can accrue so much stuff with things like this. And that's where I'm just like, you know, this is going to give you so much stuff that you just wanted. So I don't know why this flew under the radar. Maybe because it's an artifact or whatever. Like, again, this is the problem with sets coming out all the time and all of that sort of stuff. It's one of those things. You just cannot keep up with every single card. And I was going to make this video earlier, but it just didn't happen. Been busy with school and whatnot. But anyway, this is what it is. So I have made it now, and hope you guys have enjoyed it. And I'm hoping you guys will drop down your thoughts, what you think down there in the comments below. And yeah, I hope you'll join me again in another one.